Go to Debbie on line one from Texas.
Hello, Dr. Joe.
Hi, Debbie.
First, I feel like I would be totally remiss if I didn't express my heartfelt gratitude for everything that you have done, presently doing, and your vision for the future for all of us geniuses who have ears to hear.
Oh,
I only first learned about you a little over a year ago, October 6th, I remember where I was in 2017, and I've been an avid student doing the work daily ever since, so really, it's been transformational. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for doing the work. That's the greatest compliment you can give me by far.
All right, my question has to do with your perspective on the existence of demons as many cultures portray in their spiritual teachings, and I'm going to give you a reference after asking the question. In a universe that's based upon balance, the yin, the yang, everything that you're teaching about connecting with the divine in the unified field and marrying our attentions with elevated emotions, is there an opposite in play that's required for balance in the universe? And my reference is this. Not long ago, from what I perceived to be a reliable online source, I heard a story that back in the Vietnam era, the military was using night vision goggles in the red spectrum. And according to this source, it was reported that many pilots were reported to have seen demons while using them, not only seeing them, but that these entities were actually looking back at them, trying to interact with them, and it caused huge problems. I mean, many of the pilots were freaking out, and apparently the military had to change things, and they now use a green spectrum night vision goggles. And apparently, again, this phenomenon is no longer an issue. So what are your thoughts on demons?
Okay, so I'm going to explain this from a very scientific standpoint, because I don't want to be referenced as somebody who gives his power away to entities that don't have bodies, but love to be tricksters and love to feed off of people's emotional reactions. So if you take the light spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, and you look at the frequencies way, way down, the slowest frequencies before you get to the material world, the range of microwaves and the range of radio waves and those big, big wavelengths and those slow frequencies. And then you move into the realm of infrared. And then from infrared on the spectrum, there's visible light, and that's a very small spectrum, the wavelength of light that lights up everything material. If we didn't have that light, we have difficulty interacting in our environment. So we need light to be able to navigate in the 3D world. And then you have the frequency beyond light, which is ultraviolet, and you have X-ray, you have gamma rays, and you have then this realm of cosmic rays and ultimately what's called the 0-point field. Now, Einstein said that there's no such thing as matter. It's the slowest frequency that we perceive with our senses. He also said E = mc squared, which says that anything material that's traveling at the speed of light is going to go faster than the speed of light, is going to disappear and turn into pure energy. So this realm between the material world and those slower frequencies, all the way through infrared frequency to visible light, is really the spectrum that we interact with in the three-dimensional reality. Now, those wavelengths tend to be slower, and they tend to be more, they tend to be associated with emotions that are survival emotions, from guilt to shame to fear to unworthiness, to sadness, to suffering, to sexuality and sexual addictions, to addictions, emotional addictions, to anger, hostility, competition, frustration, hatred. And those emotions tend to be in the lower energy centers of the body. Now, I want to be very, very articulate and specific about this. As people move out of the three-dimensional reality and they begin to pass this plane, as an example, a certain percentage of those beings that have been so attached, any human being that's been so attached to any of those emotions or any of those problems or any of those addictions, they get caught between worlds, between the material world and the world of light, the speed of light. And what's in there is that infrared spectrum. And the infrared spectrum is where you'll see these um, beings that don't have a physical body, but what they're looking for is energy. And what they're looking for is to feed off of energy. And so they tend to be pranksters. They tend to try to evoke strong emotions, from fear to anything in between. And in that realm, if you react, then on some level, they have your attention. And if they have your attention, they have your energy. If your ambition is to not get caught up in that world, but to continue beyond the realm of polarity and duality, if you understand that there's frequencies that exist faster than the speed of light, that's called the quantum, and you realize that quantum, that there's no bodies there, there's no people there, there's no things, there's no objects, there's no places, there isn't even time, that there's a level of wholeness and oneness, or a greater level of order and energy that's transcendent of the polarity that exists in the three-dimensional reality. In other words, separation is what creates polarity. So the more you live by these emotions and the hormones of stress, the more they heighten your senses and we become materialists. So then there's me here and there's you there. There's me here and my future way over there. And it creates separation, because a separation is seeing two different points of consciousness, where you are and then your goals and your visions and your dreams, and or somebody that looks different than you or isn't the same as you experience more separation. So we have this perception that as we're immersed in the world of the senses, that there's separation between everything material. But in the quantum field is an invisible field of unifying energy that connects everything material. And in fact, Einstein said the field, this quantum field, is the sole governing agency of the particle. He didn't say the particle controls the particle. He said the field controls the particle. So then people who have trouble in their lives in terms of victimization, they're emitting energy out of that center, and that's perfect energy for these discarnate beings to feed off of. Now, they can't feed off a person who isn't a victim, because it's not consistent with them energetically. I'm using this as an example. So as people understand that there's a roadmap that they have to pass through, that as they overcome in their work, their inner work, these self-limiting emotions, if they're moving through those layers, they're moving through those emotions, they're moving through those energies. If they understand that they can move through them, and by overcoming the emotions, I've seen this actually, when a person overcomes an emotion, that those discarnates have nothing to feed off of. They're parasites, and what they're doing is a parasite gives the host a certain dose of a substance, a chemical, real parasites, to weaken the host long enough to feed off of it, but not to take its life. And these kind of parasites that feed off of people that feel victimized or have difficulties overcoming those emotions. They're addicted to them. So in a sense, if a person is that way, if they're a victim, then it makes sense then that they can easily be influenced, because a victim is a person who says my feelings and my thoughts are being controlled by everyone and everything outside of me, and that means they have no power to change. So when people begin to make those substantial changes, and they change the way they think and feel, and they start doing the inner work, then on the side effect of that is there's a liberation of energy, and there's a change in consciousness. And that change of consciousness is fundamentally important, because now all of a sudden you're moving beyond that energy or that emotion or that level of consciousness. And if you get to that point where energy passes through that tiny little portal, the center of the magnet, where there's no longer any polarity, now all of a sudden energy begins to make it into your heart, and now you feel whole. you feel love, you feel gratitude, you feel kindness, you feel care, and you're no longer consistent with the energy of these entities that don't have bodies. And so the key is, if it happens to you, and it's happened to me in my own inner work, that your job is to not react emotionally. The moment you react emotionally, the game is on. If you have a will to understand that you're a free-willed individual and that you're moving through certain frequencies to get to a greater frequency, then if you understood that, you would move through it without reacting, and then give less of your power away to them. The moment they capture your attention, I've seen people do this and get stuck for years, where they think that those beings are doing everything to them in their lives, and that's exactly what they want you to think. But in a sense, that's absolutely not the truth. It's no different than somebody giving you a voodoo curse. In certain cultures, they believe that a person is that powerful, but only to a person that believes that to be true, or a person who's victimized, so victimized that they believe that's true. A person who's solid in their own free will, and solid in their conviction and their management of energy, they would see it as something that would have no effect on them, because they're no longer playing from that consciousness or that level of energy. So I hesitate a lot of times to talk about this, because people take it in so many different ways, but they latch on the energies, and they're usually slower frequencies, and they can be seen at times by infrared cameras, because that's the frequency that they're using. And certainly the emotions of suffering and pain, they tend to be along that frequency as well. So I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time giving them my attention, or giving them my energy, or be thinking about them. I would just say, well, if I was there, there's got to be a greater frequency, a greater energy that I can tune into, and move into that energy and move right past it. And they're just at a certain spectrum, a certain color in the rainbow that you want to move through. And that's how they change. And people in my work have had moments of that, and as they overcame their past and overcame their emotions, they're no longer victims. Then they have to go. They just have to find some other place to be.
Sure.
So that's probably the easiest way for me to explain it, Ted.
And it was a great answer. It's not something I'm having a problem with, but it was something I was curious about, and I wanted to ask a question that would serve the whole. But I did want to go back and clarify. You're saying that these entities, they are real, but it's not anything to concern ourselves with. We can move past them, and we don't have to allow them to have our energy. But they are real, and where did they come from then? Are they they are human life forms and souls that have died
Stuck.
and passed on?
They're stuck between the 3D reality and the light. They're not going on to the light, because they're attached to this 3D world, and they don't have bodies, so they can't gamble, they can't do pornography, they can't abuse anybody. They don't have a body, but they're looking for energy that's similar. So they're just existing in purgatory. They're existing between worlds.
Can they go on to the light?
Of
at
course,
any
many
point?
of them do. Of course, many of them do. They sooner or later evolve. But sooner or
That's
later,
awesome.
right? Sooner or later, we all do, right? It's just when you make up your mind is when you just say there's got to be more, right? So
Yeah.
So the key is that if you are executing free will, and you're a sovereign soul, and you say I have free will here. Now, once you say that you have free will, then you can't be. They have to respect that, because free will is always respected in the universe. When you're unconscious and you don't demonstrate free will, well, it's no different than slaughtering a chicken. I mean, it's just what how people see it. So the key is to move through it. There's a greater frequency with greater consciousness, and that's where we want to go.
Awesome. Perfect answer. I'm so thankful for you.
Oh, thank you for doing the work, Debbie.
All right. Thank you, and good night.
Good night. Okay.